so John, you vote in the AP men's poll.
Mm-hmm.
Danny and I vote in the AP women's poll, hence the name of the podcast. So again, Danny, you kind of hit on this, but when you guys are voting each week, what are you kind of looking at? How much are you looking at scores during the week and games and trying to keep abreast of, like what you talked about, Danny, the context of it all? And so, I mean, what's just kind of the method to your madness when you're voting? Danny, I'll start with you.
I mean, obviously, I keep track of scores during the week. I follow a decent amount of really talented, good reporters that cover women's basketball. So, especially nationally. So they keep me up to date, and you try to keep track of, especially what's happening with the top tier teams. I would say the majority of my work is probably done on Sunday. When Doug sends out, the email saying, here's what happened with the top 25 teams, obviously go over that. Then I go over, net rankings, standings, some of the other things I like to look at. Some context stuff like, how much am I weighing this loss against who? Was this person out? Et cetera, et cetera. Why? Sometimes you look at a score and it's like, they lost by 20 points. Why did that happen? So you try to read in, three starters were out, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you don't want to ding them that much. Sometimes you go back and look at a loss that, like Oklahoma State, for example. When Texas lost to Oklahoma State a couple weeks ago, that looked awful on Texas. And I think I dropped them from my poll at that point. That maybe one of the weeks I didn't vote for them. But then the next week when they went and beat Baylor, and then were competitive against Iowa State, you're like, okay, that loss isn't as bad. I can go back and look at that and be like, okay, it's still not a great loss for Texas, but, that's not as terrible as I thought it was. So you try to, go back and re-examine some of the previous losses. Maybe if a team had a huge win against a team that's kind of fallen off, Texas fans just talking about football, that Notre Dame game when they beat Notre Dame, 2016, everyone thought that was the best one in the world, and Notre Dame fell off and it wasn't that great. So you try to, re-examine some stuff. Obviously you can't do that for all 25 teams you vote for. I mean, that's at this point in the season, every team has like 20 games in their schedule. You can't go that in depth. So, you just kind of take some bits and pieces, some of its vibes, move around the poll. I usually do my poll on Sunday night, submit it. I get up on Monday morning, usually before I wake my son up, get him ready for school, and then I re-go over it just to make sure that there isn't anything that I didn't like. Sometimes there's like a team like I really wanted to vote this team higher, and so I'll readjust and resubmit and go about my business. So it's I wouldn't say I spend 48 hours on this thing, or it's something I'm devoted my entire week to, but it's definitely something I spend an hour or so on Sunday, and then a few minutes on Monday just to make sure I didn't screw anything up or make any outrageous votes or something like that. Because every once in a while, something like that will happen. Like, oh shoot, I clicked on the wrong team. I need to make sure I don't hit send on that.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to what I do. But John, how about you?
Yeah, I'll definitely look at scores, strength of schedule, who they've played lately. Like Kansas last week, they were number 2. They lost an overtime game at K-State. But then you look at that 83-60 loss to TCU at Allen Fieldhouse, where they hardly ever lose. It was Bill Self's second worst loss there. So I think you have to drop them a few more slots when you lose that big at home. I'm kind of like Danny. I spent about an hour doing it on Sunday night. And I'll tell you that usually about the top 20 are not too hard to figure out. It's those last 5 that I probably spend the most time on. I'll usually put like somebody from a smaller conference in that top 5. And in that last 5, like College of Charleston or Florida Atlantic, or maybe a New Mexico, somebody with a really good record, that's hasn't got a lot of recognition. And at the same time, I will say, a team like Kentucky or North Carolina, who frankly have been disappointments this year, I'm less likely to put them in one of those last 2 or 3 spots, with 6 or 7 losses. Yeah. I think I would rather put a team from a smaller conference who's not getting a whole lot of recognition. But yeah, really, there's a whole lot of different angles you have to think about, and but it's pretty fun to do.
So I would say I there's a lot of things, a lot of common threads here. I mean, I would say I spend about the same amount of time that you guys do, and I also work on it on Sunday night. As Danny said, we have, just how the sausage is made a little bit. We have Doug Feinberg from the AP sends out the women's stuff about how each team fared that week. Personally, I tend to not drop a team if they haven't lost a game that week. So that sometimes can simplify your poll, now is that a hard and fast rule? Not necessarily, because if there are teams that gain a really, really impressive win, I think I want to say I flipped Utah and Notre Dame this week in the poll. Trying to remember the context behind all of that, but anyway, you can climb over another team if I think that you've really accomplished something great. I mean, I do. I don't really care how other voters are ranking teams. I don't really look at that. I do look at one of the little metrics I look at. I don't look much at the net ranking, but maybe I should. But I do look at record against other ranked teams, which that probably is reflected in a net ranking. And for instance, I think the LSU women are probably pretty good. And I've got them about 6th in the country, and they're what, 3rd, I want to say, Danny, overall. That said, they've played one top 25 team all year long. Baylor's played 7. And it's hard to know just how good LSU is. And the one they played was in conference play. They didn't play any in non-conference. So, I've got them ranked a little bit lower just because of that. Now they're still undefeated. So, and I think Angel Reese is one of the best players in the country. And they, they still will be a hard out for somebody in the NCAA tournament. But those are kind of the things that I look at when I'm making my votes, because I do think that strength of schedule should be an important metric, so. And personally, I don't mind doing it. I told Danny the other day, the bane of my existence is the voting on the Big 12 Player of the Week stuff, just because you have a very small window of time to do that. So I like to have a little bit more leeway. Anyway,
I commend you, guys.
Yeah, go ahead.
I commend you for openly saying that you have LSU 6, because I would imagine their head coach still has your phone number. And
she does still have my phone number.
Hunt you down.
Yeah, she sees all, Danny.
She fortunately does not call or text like she used to, but I will say I texted her once her first season last year. I mean, we've conversed a couple of times, but she had a girl named Cherry on her team, a last name Cherry, and she had a really good game at the start of the season, and I think LSU won their first game under Mulkey. And I texted Kim and I said, "Congratulations on the first win at LSU." I said, "That said, if I see a headline that says Cherry's in the doghouse, I'm not going to be surprised at all." And Kim is, if nothing else, Kim tends to have a pretty good sense of humor. And I was expecting more of a reaction. All she did was just text back and said, "Thanks, Brice." So there you go. I almost thought, I wonder if Cherry's already in the doghouse. So anyway.
Just because of the name.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, "Oh my gosh, how did I get a Cherry on this team?"